Jack booked a remote cabin in the Alps to escape the ruins of his life. It was cheap, almost too cheap. The owner didn't explain why no one else ever stayed there. But Jack didn't care. Until the voices started. Voices that knew things no one else could. Now he's trapped between memory and madness. And what he finds in the attic will change everything. What would you do if the ghosts knew your name before you arrived? Jack scrolled through dozens of listings, each more expensive and touristy than the last. He wasn't looking for comfort or adventure, he wanted isolation. He wanted the kind of silence that could crush a man's thoughts into dust. When he stumbled upon the listing for the Edelweiss Hollow cabin, he thought it was a mistake. €40 a night for a full wooden chalet with panoramic views of the Alps. No reviews, no flashy pictures, and a strange line in the description, must arrive before dark. Owner will not remain on site. Still, Jack wasn't in the mood for questions. He clicked book now without hesitation. The confirmation email came with directions and one last sentence: do not ask locals about the cabin. They won't tell you the truth. He rented a small car at the airport in Geneva and made the 4-hour drive through winding mountain roads. As he climbed higher, the air thinned and the towns grew smaller. He stopped for fuel in a nearly abandoned village at the base of the last mountain pass. Jack asked the gas station clerk for help finding the road to Edelweiss Hollow. The man's face froze. He simply pointed, avoiding Jack's eyes. Jack tried again, but the man turned away silently. The interaction left a strange chill crawling up Jack's spine. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, then from gravel to dirt. Branches scraped the car windows like fingernails. GPS lost signal 20 minutes in. By the time Jack spotted the cabin, dusk had painted the landscape in shades of blue and grey. The structure sat alone in a wide clearing, cradled by towering pines. It looked old but solid, a steep roof sagging under the weight of the years. Snow still clung to the shadows despite spring's arrival. As he parked, a figure stepped from the trees. A short, wiry man in a heavy coat and wool cap stood motionless beside the porch. Jack greeted him, but the man simply handed him a brass key attached to a bone-carved ring. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just stared at Jack for a long moment, then turned and walked back into the woods. No car, no path, just gone. Inside, the cabin was rustic but clean. A fireplace, worn furniture, and old oil paintings lined the walls. A faded photo above the mantel showed the same man Jack had just met, but the image was dated 1974. A chill prickled across his neck. He brushed it off. Probably family resemblance. He lit a fire, unpacked his bag, and tried to enjoy the quiet. The silence was thick, almost physical. No birdsong. No wind. Just the slow crackle of firewood. The first oddity came when he opened the kitchen drawer. Inside was a dusty bundle of maps, hand-drawn, marked with warnings in German. He couldn't read most of it, but one phrase kept appearing: "Sie hören dich, wenn du sprichst." They hear you when you speak. Jack set them aside, telling himself it was just old local folklore. Night fell fast in the mountains. Jack sat by the fire with a journal, trying to make sense of his thoughts. The flames reflected in the windows, hiding the darkness outside. At exactly midnight, the doorknob rattled. Once. Then silence. He froze. There was no wind.
No storm.
No animals in sight. The doorknob didn't rattle again. He waited, heart racing. Then came a slow knock. Soft. Deliberate. Jack approached, peered through the peephole, but saw only black. He opened the door with sudden courage. Nothing. Just empty snow and the whisper of trees. As he closed it, he noticed a slip of paper on the ground, folded neatly. In English, scrawled in old handwriting: "Do not open the door again. No matter who asks." There was no signature.
No explanation.
He searched outside with a flashlight but saw no footprints. The snow was undisturbed. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, he found a chair had moved from the fireplace to the window facing the woods. He didn't remember placing it there. Maybe he was more tired than he thought. Maybe the isolation was already getting to him. But when he stepped outside to clear his head, he found something else. A circle of stones behind the cabin, about 15 feet wide, with a wooden totem in the center. It hadn't been in the listing. Fresh ash filled the center of the circle, as if a fire had been lit there recently. Jack took a step toward it, but a sharp crack echoed from the trees. A branch breaking? A warning. He stepped back. The air felt colder than it should have been. Later that day, he tried calling the owner. The phone went straight to voicemail. He messaged through the booking app. No reply. He tried again, but no signal. He went back inside. The maps were still there. The key still lay on the table. Everything looked the same. But the cabin no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like something watching him breathe. Jack told himself he was just being dramatic. Just tired. But something about this place was wrong. It wasn't just the price. It wasn't just the silence. It was the feeling that he had walked into a place where time held its breath, waiting for someone foolish enough to ignore the warnings. And now that someone was him. Before Jack ever saw the cabin, he had already vanished from the world he once called home. His name used to be printed under war zone headlines. Jack Telford, correspondent, truth seeker, fearless in the face of chaos. He traveled to cities crumbling under gunfire, captured photos of children with empty eyes, and wrote words that made readers cry. But somewhere along the way, the stories stopped being other people's. One moment he was taking cover behind a crumbling wall in Aleppo. The next he was waking up in a therapist's chair back in London with no memory of the flight home. His wife was already gone by then. She had left when she realized Jack never truly came back from any of his assignments. His heart remained scattered across countries he would never return to, places where death felt like background noise. He didn't even fight for the marriage. He watched her walk out of their flat with a suitcase and an apology he didn't answer. Then came the panic attacks. The night sweats. The sound of invisible gunfire echoing in his ears every time he closed his eyes. He lost his job 3 months later after an editor found him muttering to himself in the middle of a meeting. After that, Jack disappeared from everyone's lives. He didn't return calls. Didn't answer texts. Sold his furniture, stored a few things in a friend's garage, and vanished into a grey space between past and future. The only thing he kept was his camera, though he hadn't used it in months. He felt like a ghost wandering through a city of the living, and no one seemed to notice. What finally drove him to search for escape wasn't a moment of pain, but numbness. A complete lack of feeling. He wasn't afraid, or angry, or sad anymore. He was nothing. That scared him more than any bullet ever had. When he found the listing for the cabin, something inside him whispered that it was the place he needed to be. Not because it was peaceful, but because it was silent. And Jack wanted to sit in that silence until something, anything, spoke back. The day before he left, he stood outside his flat staring at the locked door. He didn't leave a note. Didn't cancel his utilities. He simply walked away. In the back of his mind, he wondered if anyone would even notice. His life had shrunk into a single suitcase, and with it, he carried years of unspoken thoughts. On the plane, he tried to sleep but kept jolting awake, convinced someone was whispering in his ear. When he looked around, no one was there. He told himself it was jet lag, but a small part of him wondered if his mind was starting to slip. During the drive to the Alps, he played old voice memos on his phone. Some were from his wife, laughing at inside jokes. Others were recordings from war zones, interviews, sounds of chaos. One file was corrupted and played nothing but static. Jack kept it anyway. He liked how it reminded him of the radio silence before an ambush. That kind of quiet was always worse than noise. It meant something was coming. On his second day in the cabin, Jack sat on the porch and looked out at the vast stretch of white and pine. No roads. No power lines. No distant towns glowing on the horizon. Just wilderness. He felt like he had been dropped onto another planet. And yet, it was the first time in years that his hands weren't shaking. He made tea, sat by the fire, and for the first time, tried writing again. But every page he filled ended with the same sentence, "They hear you when you speak." He had read it on the old maps, and now it echoed in his thoughts. He didn't know who they were. Maybe it was just his subconscious giving shape to all the trauma he never processed. Or maybe it was something worse. Something this place knew before he even arrived. Later that night, Jack walked outside again. The stars were sharp in the sky, frozen like glass. He thought he saw movement in the trees, a flicker of shadow too tall to be human. He closed the door quickly, locked it, then double-checked the windows. Before bed, he opened his journal and wrote a message to himself: "You are here because no one else will find you. That's the point." He underlined it twice, then turned off the light. At 2 a.m., he woke up drenched in sweat. Not because of a nightmare. Because he heard his own voice whispering from the living room. He crept out of bed, heart pounding. The room was empty. His phone was off. No one was there. But sitting on the table was his tape recorder, one he hadn't used in months. It was playing something. A voice repeating over and over, "You are here because no one else will find you." His exact words from earlier. He hadn't recorded them. He hadn't even touched the device since he arrived. He turned it off and threw it across the room. It broke against the wall. For a long time, he just stood there, listening to the fire die down. That's when he realized the fireplace wasn't the only thing making noise. Something was breathing behind the wall. Not wind. Not animals. Breathing. Slow and heavy. Jack pressed his ear to the wood. It stopped. And then, faintly, a voice whispered from inside the wall, so softly he almost missed it. "Don't you want to feel again?" Jack stepped back, breath caught in his throat. That's when the chair by the window moved on its own. Not slid. Moved, lifted slightly, then turned to face him. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He just stood there, paralyzed, while the silence in the room started to hum with energy. Not noise, but pressure. Like the cabin itself was waiting for his answer. The third night came faster than Jack expected. Time moved strangely in the cabin, like the clock hands ticked without rhythm. He had tried to create routine, morning tea, reading, writing, but the silence between each action grew louder. On the first night, the cabin had welcomed him with stillness. On the second, it had started to breathe. By the third, it was watching. That evening, snow began falling hard. The sky turned from grey to black in minutes. Jack stacked more logs into the fireplace and lit 3 candles. The flames danced nervously. He couldn't explain why, but every time he looked out the window, he felt like something had just moved out of sight. The woods didn't feel empty anymore. They felt full, like an audience holding its breath. He was pouring tea when he heard it. A sharp knock at the door. 3 times. Clear and slow. Jack froze, cup in hand. It was exactly midnight. No one should be out there. Not this far up. Not in this weather. He waited. Nothing followed. No footsteps in the snow. No voice. Just stillness. Then came another knock. This time, faster. Urgent. Jack slowly walked to the door, placed his hand on the knob, then stopped. He remembered the paper he found the first night. Do not open the door again. No matter who asks. His fingers trembled, but he stepped back. The knocking stopped. He stayed up, waiting for something to happen, but the rest of the night passed quietly. At sunrise, a new note had been slid under the door. Same paper. Same handwriting. One more night. Stay silent. No explanation. No signature. Jack searched the woods again but found nothing. No footprints. No signs of life. He shouted into the trees, but his voice echoed back empty. The only reply was the wind shifting through the branches like whispers. That evening, he searched the cabin from top to bottom. The attic door was nailed shut. The basement was locked with a rusted chain. He grabbed a flashlight and wire cutters and forced the basement door open. The steps groaned under his weight. The air was colder down there, stale and thick. Dust coated every surface. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, jars, and broken tools. In the corner, he found something strange. A child's rocking horse, sitting in perfect condition, next to a small shoe, old, leather, too small for an adult. It was placed neatly on top of a folded blanket. Jack stepped closer and saw something carved into the wood of the rocking horse. A name. Lena. He didn't recognize it. Near it, He found a faded diary, its cover cracked with age. The pages were filled with frantic writing in German, but one page had been translated with pencil. The girl hears them best. They pretend to be her parents. But they are not her parents. They come when she cries. Jack backed away and closed the journal. As he turned to leave, the rocking horse creaked forward on its own. He ran up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in the chair facing the woods, flashlight in one hand, fire poker in the other. At midnight, the knocking came again. But this time, it wasn't from the door. It came from the window. 3 sharp taps. Then silence. Jack stood and approached slowly. The snow outside had stopped. Moonlight made the forest glow pale blue. As he got closer, his breath caught. There was a handprint on the glass. Small. Like a child's. On the inside. Jack turned around. Nothing was there. But the flashlight flickered and went out. He tried the switch. Nothing. He lit a candle and stepped back. On the wall above the fireplace, the photo of the owner had changed. His face remained the same, but now, behind him in the background, stood a little girl. Pale dress. Dark eyes. Barefoot in snow. Jack hadn't noticed her before. He could have sworn she wasn't there yesterday. He took the photo off the wall. The frame was old and nailed shut. He turned it over. On the back was carved the same name, Lena. That night, he found himself talking out loud. Not to himself, but to something he couldn't see. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. The room didn't answer. But from the chimney, something whispered back. Not words. Just the sound of a child humming a lullaby. Soft. Out of tune. But close. Too close. At dawn, Jack found another note under the door. This time, it was wet. The ink was smudged. But he could still read it. "You must leave before nightfall. Or she'll find your voice." The "she" was underlined twice. Jack packed his things quickly. He ran to the car. The engine didn't start. The dashboard lights flickered, then went black. He tried again. Nothing. He stepped out, slammed the door, and looked toward the trail, but the path he came in on was gone. Completely buried under fresh snow. There were no tire tracks. No footprints. Just white. He went back inside, trying not to panic. He turned on his phone to check the time. It blinked 11:59. Then froze. He tapped it. It wouldn't respond. He left it on the table. A minute passed. Then 2. The time never changed. It was always 11:59. As if the cabin had locked the hour in place. Jack sat down, staring at the frozen clock, when the door slowly creaked open on its own. No wind. No pressure. Just a slow, deliberate swing. Outside, nothing waited. Just snow and silence. But the humming had returned. Louder this time. Coming from inside the walls. Jack stood. The candle flickered. Then every other candle in the room went out. All at once. Jack no longer trusted the daylight. It had become a disguise, a fragile mask the cabin wore before revealing its true self each night. After the door opened on its own and the humming filled the walls, Jack stayed awake until morning, staring into the fire like it was the last thread tying him to reality. When the sun finally came up, he felt no relief. The windows didn't frost over, the wind had died, but the air inside the cabin was thick with something unseen. Something waiting. He stepped outside just after sunrise, squinting at the trees. Snow still covered the trail, but now there were footprints leading into the woods. Barefoot prints. Small. Delicate. He followed them for several yards before they simply vanished. Back inside, he found his phone powered on again, though the time remained frozen at 11:59. His audio files were untouched, except for one. A new file labeled her song. He never recorded it. When he played it, the voice was his own, whispering something in a language he didn't understand. At the end, it changed. A girl's voice repeated a phrase in English over and over. "I remember you. I remember you. I remember you." He deleted it. The file reappeared seconds later. This time with the name "Do You Remember Me?" Jack's grip on reason began to slip. He stopped trying to reach anyone. The phone calls never went through. The screen flickered with static if he tried to message someone. The satellite communicator he found in the kitchen drawer didn't even turn on. It was as if the cabin existed in its own reality, severed from the rest of the world. Jack started writing in his journal again, but each morning the pages were blank. When he tried filming a message with his camera, the playback showed only snow. Not the falling kind, the static kind. Just noise. That afternoon, desperate for answers, he broke open the attic. The stairs creaked under his weight as he climbed into the dust-choked space. It was cold. Much colder than anywhere else in the cabin. The light bulb overhead flickered to life for a moment, then popped and went out. In the dark, Jack saw shapes. Furniture draped in old sheets. Stacks of boxes. One of the boxes was labeled Guest Records. Inside, he found journals, photographs, and videotapes, some so old the film had crumbled. But one tape had a more recent label. Amelie, March 2023. Just over 2 years ago. He brought it downstairs. There was an old camcorder in the living room cabinet. He loaded the tape, pressed play, and watched. The video showed a woman, early 30s, sitting on the same couch Jack was sitting on now. She was talking to the camera, her voice calm but tense. "I booked this cabin because it was cheap. I should have known better. The owner warned me not to stay past the second night. I didn't listen." She flipped the camera around to show the window. It was snowing. She whispered, "They don't like to be seen. But they remember everything." Later in the footage, her voice cracked. She was crying. "They use voices. People you love. They know things about you they shouldn't. They make you believe they're real." The last 5 minutes of the tape were silent. Just her standing in the attic, pointing the camera toward a dark corner. At first, Jack saw nothing. But then a shape appeared. A pale figure crouched behind boxes. Small. Watching. And then, as the woman turned the camera toward herself, something horrifying appeared in the reflection of the attic window behind her. A tall shadow, hollow eyes, standing over her shoulder. The tape ended. Jack dropped the camera. It hit the floor and cracked. His hands were shaking. He rewound the tape. Played it again. But now, the footage had changed. The final frame didn't end with the woman in the attic. It ended with a still shot of Jack, his face, frozen in confusion, as if taken that morning. The timestamp said March 2023. He staggered back, breathing hard. The cabin wasn't haunted in the usual way. It didn't just trap people. It remembered them. It watched them. It mirrored their voices and took their faces. Every sound Jack had heard, the footsteps, the knocking, the humming, it all came from something that had learned to mimic. And now, it was mimicking him. That night, the voices came again. This time, they were louder. More specific. Jack heard his ex-wife calling to him from outside. "Jack, I'm cold. Please let me in." He knew it couldn't be her. She lived in Spain now. But the voice was perfect. Down to the tone. The way she used to say his name when she was half asleep. He sat frozen by the fire as her voice turned desperate. "Jack, why did you leave me? Why didn't you fight for us?" Then came the voice of his old friend from Syria, the one who died in an explosion. "You said you'd pull me out. You promised." Jack screamed and covered his ears. He knew what was happening. The cabin was pulling out every regret, every failure, every hidden guilt and giving it a voice. A face. A presence. It wasn't just haunted, it was feeding on memory. Feeding on pain. And Jack had brought plenty of both. When the voices faded, he wrote a single sentence in the journal, over and over, until he ran out of pages. "If I can't remember what's real, maybe I can still choose who I am." But even that choice was slipping away. That night, when he looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize his own face. His eyes were darker. His mouth didn't move when he blinked. And when he finally forced himself to sleep, he dreamed of the little girl, Lena, standing in the woods, looking up at him, whispering his name with her mouth closed. By the time the fourth night arrived, Jack had stopped pretending he could leave. The car was dead, the snow hadn't let up, and the trail behind the cabin was gone like it had never existed. He tried building a signal fire, but the smoke never rose past the trees. It simply vanished into the still air. He walked 5 miles into the woods in one direction, marking trees as he went, but somehow ended up circling back to the cabin, no matter what path he took. The forest was bending itself around him. The land had changed its rules. Jack wasn't stuck in a place anymore, he was stuck in a loop. And the cabin was the center of it. He went back into the attic. Something had shifted there since the last visit. The boxes were in new places, like someone, or something, had gone through them. On the floor was a journal, half buried under old photographs. Jack picked it up. It didn't look like the others. It was newer. The name Amelie was handwritten on the cover. He recognized it from the videotape, the woman who warned him. He flipped through the pages. Most of it was filled with drawings. Faces with black eyes, stick figures missing their mouths, rough maps of the forest that circled around the word void in bold letters. But then, in the center of the journal, he found a photo paper-clipped to a page. It was a photo of her, Amelie, standing on the porch of the cabin. But beside her, in the photo, was Jack. His hands started to shake. He didn't remember ever meeting her. He'd never seen her before watching the tape. But there he was, unmistakable. Same jacket. Same beard. Same scar on his cheek. The caption scribbled underneath in her writing read, "Jack didn't remember me. But he was here. And I think, he never left." The rest of the journal turned into chaos. The handwriting became frantic. Sentences were repeated over and over like chants. It takes pieces of us. One at a time. Until we forget we were ever whole. Then, in bold across an entire page, "If you're reading this, you've already been here." Jack dropped the journal and stumbled back. His mind raced through every detail of his arrival. Booking the cabin. The drive. The owner. But suddenly, none of it felt solid. He couldn't remember the name of the town he passed. Couldn't remember the airport. The rental car. He ran to his bag, grabbed his passport. The pages were blank. No stamps. No signs of travel. The booking email on his phone was gone. The only app left was the one that played the audio files. Everything else was deleted. It was like his entire arrival had been a memory implanted in his head. A trap. And he walked right into it. He searched for more footage. Inside one of the attic boxes, he found a USB drive in an envelope labeled guest_001. He plugged it into the cabin's old laptop. There were video files. Hundreds. All with different names. Each file was labeled with a date and a face. Men. Women. All types. He played one. It was a woman crying in the kitchen. Same cabin. She was begging for help. The date stamp showed 1982. Another clip, an older man scribbling on the walls. 1999. Then another, showing a couple sleeping, the camera filming them from the ceiling. 2007. Then he saw it. One file marked Jack_Telford_2016. He froze. He had never been here before this trip. That was what he believed. But he clicked play. The screen showed him, younger, more tired, sitting at the same table he was sitting at now. He was whispering, staring directly into the camera. "If I forget who I am again, if I loop back here, someone stop me. Please. I can't go through it again." Then he looked straight into the lens and said something Jack would never forget. "They aren't ghosts. They're echoes. And I'm the loudest one." He shut the laptop. His breath caught in his throat. All this time, he thought he was the guest. The newcomer. But what if he had been part of the cabin longer than he remembered? What if the cabin didn't attract the broken, but made them? Fed on their memories until they became part of it. Jack looked around the room. Every creak, every shadow, every hum in the walls felt familiar. Not in a déjà vu way. In a deep, cellular way. Like he belonged here. Like he was part of the walls. He grabbed the journal again, flipping through it wildly, until he found one last page with handwriting that wasn't Amelie's. It was his. I asked them to take the pain away. They took everything else too. Jack stumbled to the mirror again. This time, when he looked at his reflection, he didn't move. The man in the mirror stared back, but didn't blink when Jack did. It wasn't a reflection. It was a recording. He waved his hand. The figure did nothing. Then slowly smiled. A cold, stretched smile. Jack screamed and threw the candle at the glass. It cracked but didn't break. The whispering began again. This time, not from the walls, but from inside his own head. Stay. 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 It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. A promise that the pain could stop. That he didn't have to remember anymore. That the endless grief, guilt, and fear could be left behind, replaced with the simple silence of forgetting. Jack dropped to his knees. He clutched the journal to his chest, trying to hold on to something real. But what if nothing was? What if his story, his identity, his memories were all just leftovers the cabin let him keep to make the fall easier? He crawled into the corner of the room and began whispering to himself the names of people he loved. His ex-wife. His mother. His best friend. Each name felt heavier than the last. And with each one, the voices in his mind grew louder, mocking him, mimicking him. "I'm Jack," he whispered. "I'm Jack Telford." "No," the cabin said through the walls. "You were." Jack didn't sleep again. Sleep had become dangerous. Each time he drifted off, he felt something tugging at the edges of his thoughts, pulling him deeper into a place he wasn't sure he could return from. He now avoided mirrors, windows, and even his own voice. The whispers were everywhere, speaking in tones that mirrored people he trusted, people he'd lost. The line between memory and manipulation had vanished. He could no longer tell if he was reliving a nightmare or if the nightmare had become him. That morning, or what he thought was morning, he found a dusty old camera set up on a tripod facing the dining table. The light on it was blinking red. It had been recording the entire time. He pressed stop and checked the footage. Dozens of hours. All of him. Sitting. Staring. Speaking in a low voice to someone not in the room. He didn't remember doing any of it. One clip showed him standing at the window, tapping the glass rhythmically. Another showed him speaking in German, a language he hadn't spoken since he was a child. The strangest part was how he looked, his face slightly off, like a bad copy of himself. His movements were slower, more mechanical. He looked like a man rehearsing his own life, not living it. That's when he knew it wasn't enough to escape. He had to warn whoever came next. He found the old satellite modem again, dug it out from the basement beneath a stack of moldy blankets. It powered on just long enough to get a weak signal. Jack opened his laptop and started recording a message. His voice was raw, his eyes sunken, but for the first time since arriving, his tone was steady. "If you're watching this," he began, "you've already felt it. The pull. The peace. The lies." He paused, exhaled, then continued. "The cabin doesn't keep you here with force. It keeps you here with guilt. With promises. It shows you what you think you deserve. Some of us deserve pain. Some of us deserve peace. And some of us..." He trailed off for a moment, then spoke again, quieter. "Some of us don't know the difference anymore." He confessed everything. His breakdown. His regrets. The memories that haunted him more than the voices. He explained how the cabin rewrote things, events, timelines, even people. He showed the photo of himself next to Amelie. Showed the journal. Showed the video from 2016. "I've been here before," he said. "Maybe 100 times. Maybe this is the only place I've ever been, and everything else was just something it gave me so I wouldn't scream." He smiled at that, a sad kind of smile. If you're still you, get out before the 5th night. That's when the cabin stops asking who you are, and starts telling you. He clicked upload and left the laptop on the table. The signal light blinked once. Then again. Then held steady. The file was sent. It was the only proof he had that he existed, or maybe the last piece of him that still remembered how to try. He grabbed his coat and walked out into the snow. The air outside was still and the trees didn't move, but the sky was strange. Purple and orange swirled together like bruises on the horizon. The trail wasn't gone this time. It was open. Clear. Like the cabin was inviting him to leave, finally. But something in him hesitated. He stepped forward, but his feet didn't follow. He turned around and looked at the cabin. It looked smaller now. Tired. But somehow, it felt alive. He stepped back inside. Not because he was giving up, but because he had to see what would happen. One last time. He sat at the table and waited. At midnight, the door creaked open. No footsteps. No wind. Just the door opening like a mouth ready to speak. Jack stared at it. "What do you want from me?" he asked. And from the doorway, a voice answered. His voice. "To remember." He stood and walked to the door, heart pounding, and stepped out into the snow. He didn't know if this was the end or the beginning. He didn't care anymore. He just wanted silence, not the kind that haunted you, but the kind that lets you finally rest. The snow swallowed his footsteps behind him. And then he was gone. Days later, the cabin was found completely empty. The fire had gone cold. The laptop was still on the table. The video Jack recorded had uploaded successfully. But there was no trace of Jack himself. No coat. No shoes. No prints in the snow. Just the journal, sitting open on the table with one last sentence written inside. He walked out to find himself, and left behind the part that remembered who he was. The listing for the cabin disappeared a week later. Locals claimed it had burned down. Others swore it never existed at all. But every few months, someone new finds the video Jack left online. It doesn't always have the same title. Sometimes it's labeled as Traveler's Diary. Sometimes Echoes in the Alps. But always, the same description: don't book the cabin. Not unless you're ready to give something up. And in the comment section, once quiet, new messages keep appearing. Not questions. Not theories. Just short, strange sentences. I heard her humming. I dreamed of the fireplace. I think I left something there.